All right, guys, welcome to the show. Boy, oh boy, do we have a lot to talk about today. We are playing catch up. Even if the show was 5 hours long, I don't think I'd be able to get to everything that's been going on. So right off the bat here, before I get into our stories, let me just say what happened in Asheville, North Carolina, with the remnants of that hurricane, absolutely disastrous. Asheville basically is cut off from the rest of the country now. Roads and bridges were washed out. You can only access it by air. They're like bringing in helicopters to bring the people food. It basically record storm surge from the river, and the entire downtown is wiped out. People's lives are ruined. Horrible situation. The Big Bend in Florida getting hit directly with a Category 4 hurricane, that's totally wiped out. I mean, just unbelievable carnage. Absolutely disastrous. Might even have an impact on the upcoming election, by the way, as well, because so much of the infrastructure is just gone. And you can't help but say, look, this is one of the things that was very, very clearly stated. Hey, with climate change, you're going to get a lot more natural disasters, hurricanes that are much stronger. And these like 1 in 1,000-year storms are going to happen way more often than that. And so that's a lot of what we're looking at right now. So that's terrible. You got the chemical plant in Georgia that just exploded. Lord only knows how many cancer-causing chemicals are in the atmosphere now that people are breathing in. Immediately they said, hey, shelter-in-place order. Shut your windows, shut your door. Make sure the AC isn't on. That's how disastrous that is. So everything just keeps getting worse. But we got a lot to talk about today. In just a second, Israel carpet bombs Lebanon, just declares all-out war on them. We have Donald Trump somehow is getting lower and lower and darker and darker. I got a bunch of rally clips for you. And I know I say it all the time, but it truly is a new low. So we'll talk about that. We have Mehdi Hasan versus Piers Morgan. They have an amazing debate. Later on, Trump has a new scam, $100,000 watch. And it's basically like a money laundering operation. I'll give you all the specifics on that. And then later on, Roseanne has a schizophrenic meltdown. A lot to say about that as well. All right, so everybody subscribe to the channel. Hook me up. That really helps massively and costs you absolutely nothing. And without any further ado, let's go ahead and dive into it. So this happened a few days back. This is the first time we're talking about it. I got a lot to give you guys here. But Israel launched an all-out war on Lebanon. They bombed Hezbollah in Beirut in basically heavily populated civilian area. Let me show you some videos. Here's one that went mega viral. Look how many explosions there are. There's a lot of explosions here. There's a lot of casualties. Here we go. Look. So now in this strike, they say there was, Hezbollah headquarters were in bunkers underneath these residential buildings. And Israel's now saying, and the news has effectively confirmed, that the leader of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, has been killed in these strikes. Guys, this is a huge deal. Not only did they kill Hassan Nasrallah, they also killed other top officials in Hezbollah. Basically, the top level of Hezbollah has effectively been wiped out. And even some members of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Council, which is, they really control Iran. And so it doesn't get much more of a direct declaration of war than this, right? Now, just so everybody knows, Hassan Nasrallah has been the head of Hezbollah since 1992. 1992. And he very famously, Hezbollah and Nasrallah effectively beat back Israeli aggression in 2006. Israel has tried to assassinate Nasrallah in the past at least like a dozen times. They were never able to do it. He was a worthy foe to Israel, and they have effectively eliminated him now. There's even reports that whoever was the person that immediately replaced Nasrallah, they got killed almost immediately as well in a different strike. So that's the other thing, as we'll get to. Israel, it's not like they did this one bombing and we're done. No, ever since this, they've now been consistently bombing Beirut and different parts of Beirut. This part right here is like a Shia stronghold, but they're bombing in other areas which have Christians over there. So it's messy, man. And look, here's the thing. I don't know what happens from here, right? I don't know what happens. Obviously, in the eyes of the Israelis, they think if we take out the top, like that's it, right? It's called the decapitation strategy. Take out the leader, take out the brains behind the operation, and it's a wrap. The rest crumbles. Or, you could have somebody else take the reins, and that person can decide we're going to go more aggressively against Israel, right? Or we're going to switch to guerrilla tactics and terrorism and try to infiltrate. And by the way, I should point out, we ended up at this place because apparently Israel really did infiltrate Hezbollah at the top level. We all know about the pager attack that happened recently. So obviously Israel was able to get these tainted pagers into the hands of members of Hezbollah. So their communication network went down. But obviously they have spies in at the top level because they knew Hassan Nasrallah's movements. Now, funny enough, back in 2006, when Nasrallah and Hezbollah effectively beat back Israel, the roles were reversed, where Hezbollah had infiltrated the IDF. Well, now it looks like, as I said, the roles are reversed, and Hezbollah is in shambles at the moment. Again, I don't know what happens from here, but clearly Israel wants that wider war. They are begging for that wider war. Let me give you some more. So now this right here is some of the remnants of the bombing. I haven't even pointed out yet, but I mean, this is probably the most important thing. Yes, Israel got Hassan Nasrallah, the head of Hezbollah, but they also killed hundreds of civilians as well. And they don't care. He doesn't care. It's almost like the Israeli government doesn't really view Palestinians, they don't view Palestinians as equal human beings, and they don't view Lebanese as equal human beings. It's almost like they fully dehumanize them, and they view killing civilians like swatting a mosquito or something. So look at the remnants of this bombing.
عدوان إسرائيلي غير مسبوق على الضاحية الجنوبية لبيروت. عشرات المباني دمرتها الغارات الإسرائيلية التي ضربت منطقة حارة حريق قبل قليل. نشهد حجم الدمار الكبير. أعمال الإغاثة لا تزال مستمرة حتى هذه اللحظة. أكثر من 10 مباني دمرتها الصواريخ الإسرائيلية عصر هذا اليوم في الضاحية الجنوبية لبيروت. Just absolute devastation. So now certain parts of Beirut look like Gaza, right? This is what 70% or more of Gaza looks like. All right. So then we also have this. This video is really, really heartbreaking. So here you have a mom in Lebanon recording her kid playing she just happened to be recording at the same time that the airstrikes happened of the residential buildings. Watch this. Look, this video is super important because yet again it shows you, think of how many innocent people living their lives are now going to get caught up in Israel's barbarism and savagery and aggression, right? We saw what they did to Gaza and what they're still doing to Gaza. We saw what they just started doing in the West Bank. And now they're adding Lebanon to the list. They're adding Lebanon to the list. Think about these people, right? And how many people just like this just got killed in that bombing. So the IDF says, this is the IDF's number, 300 people were killed in the Beirut strike. So according to the IDF's own numbers, hey, we got a decent number of civilians here, right? But let me just go on record and say their number is almost certainly an undercount. Almost certainly an undercount. I would reckon it's at least double what they're saying, right? And again, let's stop and think about this. Their calculation is, hey, should we kill hundreds of civilians to take out, let's say, 10 top Hezbollah officials? And they said, sure, let's do exactly that. But the backstory gets even crazier. So look at this, guys. Netanyahu gave the orders to wipe out an entire neighborhood in southern Beirut from the UN headquarters in New York. Here's him literally making the phone call to do it. Can we just state the obvious now? There is no more international law. It doesn't exist. Whatever thin veneer remained that maybe there's some semblance of rules, it's gone. Because if our top ally breaks these rules on a daily basis, violates these laws on a daily basis, and we defend them every step of the way, well, guys, of course, all U.S. enemies now think we have the right to say, no, those are the old rules. Those don't apply anymore, right? It's a lot of the same stuff you heard from Vladimir Putin and Russia when they invaded Ukraine. They certainly made the argument of, yeah, but you guys didn't abide by the rules and the laws when it came to the war in Iraq. So you get to do what you want, but nobody else gets to do what they want. I don't think people truly understand how these actions now will echo into the future and will lead to might makes right. We're back wild, wild west internationally. The UN is officially now like the League of Nations. It's useless. It's useless. And that's terrifying. By the way, when Netanyahu gave a speech also, and so many people at the UN walked out. in protest. But like, that's all they can do, right? Because the Security Council is the actual power at the UN, and the US has veto power. And we just back Israel no matter what they do. They're literally committing a genocide and have killed 48,000 Palestinians in Gaza, are now starting an offensive war against Lebanon. And we're just like, yep, let's keep sending them money and weapons. It's a lawless scenario, guys. It's a lawless scenario. Is that the world you want to live in? Is that the world you want to live in? Certainly not the world I want to live in. So, of course, Biden came out and Kamala Harris came out, and they released like a cheerleading statement, right? Hassan Nasrallah and the terrorist group he led, Hezbollah, were responsible for killing hundreds of Americans over a 4-decade reign of terror. His death from an Israeli airstrike is a measure of justice. And it goes on. This person points out, when Israel killed Ahmed Yassin, the leader of Hamas, the Bush administration condemned Israel for killing 7 others, civilians. When Israel killed Hassan Nasrallah, the Biden administration congratulates Israel for its measure of justice in strikes Israel itself says killed 300 people. In other words, Ronald Reagan, George H.W. Bush, they acted more humanitarian vis-a-vis Israel. Ronald Reagan famously made a phone call and said, Israel, you got to stop bombing Lebanon. This is a Holocaust. And then they stopped because they didn't have a choice, right? That's what Reagan did. George H.W. Bush said, we'll condition loan guarantees only if you freeze illegal settlement building. And then they froze illegal settlement building. Why? Because we're the boss, right? So they exerted more power and leverage over Israel than Joe Biden does, a Democratic administration. And by the way, Biden keeps repeatedly getting humiliated. Keeps, oh yeah, we're working on a ceasefire in Gaza. Now we're working on a ceasefire in Lebanon. We're trying our darndest. We're doing our best. And then Israel disregards that, escalates, says I have no interest in a ceasefire, kills hundreds more civilians, and Joe Biden goes out there like, that's right, Jack, we agree. That was justice. Oh my God, man. Oh my God. They're totally fucking unhinged. They're totally unhinged. Now, by the way, let me also point this out real quick. When like apolitical people or people who are moderately educated on this issue hear Hezbollah, their mind goes to, oh, that's a terrorist group like ISIS or Al-Qaeda, right? That's what they think if they don't know much of the specifics, right? The fact of the matter is, Hezbollah was one of the chief opponents of ISIS and Al-Qaeda. They fought them directly, okay? So ISIS and Al-Qaeda, they are basically Salafi jihadist groups, right? Wahhabist groups. In other words, Sunni extremists. And Hezbollah is a Shia Islamist group. Now, do I agree with Shia Islamism? No, fucking of course not, right? But on the scale of relative danger between ISIS and Al-Qaeda and Shia Islamism, ISIS and Al-Qaeda, Salafi jihadism, that's the actual radical Islam that people talk about, right? Like those are the ones who have the conquering the globe ambitions. That's Osama bin Laden's ideology. The Shia Islamists, for all of their flaws, they are not expansionist. They're not trying to do global jihad and set up a Shia Islamic caliphate all around the world. It's not true. And again, the Sunnis view Shias as apostates, and they want to kill them or convert them, right? They're number one on the list. So Hezbollah was on the front lines fighting ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Also, they're Hezbollah members elected to the parliament in Lebanon. So not only, yes, they are a militant group, but hand in hand with that, they're also what's described as a government within a government, right? They're politicians. They do social services and things of that nature. So I think a lot of the conversation around this really revolves around people just not knowing the basics and just assuming things. And the more you learn the basics, you realize it's a hell of a lot more complicated than you thought it was. And this isn't a pure good guy, pure bad guy narrative. If anything, the pure good guy, pure bad guy narrative might be flipped from what, the media wants you to believe and the political establishment in this country wants you to believe, because very clearly it's Israel who's been on the offense here every step of the way. Just look at what they're doing in Gaza. Nobody with a functioning brain anymore can come out and say, oh, yes, it's very defensive and they're being very surgical in how they target Hamas. Are you guys kidding me? It's like 90% civilian death rate, 16,000 children killed. Like, what are we talking about here? And now they're doing the same thing in Lebanon. So this just shows you how far we've gone in the wrong direction. The reaction from Biden and Kamala versus
even conservative Republican presidents like H.W. Bush and Reagan, who understood the role of Israel and was willing to check them when they needed to be checked. All right, more. Israeli terrorism has displaced 1/5 of Lebanon's population. Around 1 million Lebanese displaced by Israeli attacks, officials say. 1 million. Again, they're doing to Lebanon what they did to Gaza. Do we really want to sit back and watch this happen again? So articles like this were being run at the same time that Israel was launching a massive attack against Lebanon. Is Lebanon part of Israel's promised territory? Look, when you bring up this notion of like, hey, the extremists in Israel, the far right in Israel, they kind of want to create the greater Israel, it's called, which includes parts of many other countries, including Lebanon. When you bring that up, you're dismissed as a conspiracy theorist, right? Or they say like, well, this is something that like literal white nationalists and white supremacists talk about. And so if you mention that, you're like agreeing with them, right? That's how they try to frame it. But then you have, arguments like this coming out. You also have, this barely needs mentioning, but, Ben-Gvir and Smotrich and those types, they openly talk about like resettling Gaza, for example, expanding more in the West Bank. They want this war with Lebanon. They want a war with Iran. And it's like, at what point does 1 + 1 = 2? Because it's certainly on the minds of people with a lot of power and a lot of influence, this greater Israel. So now, if I'm not mistaken, I think they ended up deleting this article because it just said the quiet part out loud. But I have more for you. So this is incredible. This NBC reports this. Israel decided to kill Hassan Nasrallah after he refused to separate Lebanon from Gaza, officials say. Israel took the decision to assassinate Nasrallah after concluding he would not accept any diplomatic solution to end the fighting on the Israel-Lebanon border that was not tied to an end to the war in Gaza, an Israeli official said. Israel had tried repeatedly to reach a separate diplomatic solution with Hezbollah since October 8th, but Nasrallah was adamant he would continue firing until Israel made a deal with Hamas, the official told NBC News. So in other words, he said, look, the second you stop doing the genocide in Gaza, we will stop firing our rockets. And let's be clear, the rockets to this point are not all that effective. I don't know if there's been a single casualty. Now, maybe I'm wrong on that. Maybe there are some, but it would be fewer than 10 or 12 or whatever it is. And it's basically like Hezbollah is firing these rockets, and then they turn around and they say, look, we promise you we will stop. All you have to do is stop doing the genocide in Gaza. And they were the only people that were willing, them and the Houthis were the only ones who were willing to actually like look at what Israel was doing in Gaza and say, we got to put up some resistance, right? We can't just let them bulldoze all over Gaza and commit a new Holocaust. That's insane. And every time Israel would turn around and say, yeah, we're not going to stop what we're doing in Gaza. We're not going to stop. It almost got to the point where it seemed like Nasrallah was like begging them, was pleading, for the love of God, we want to stop firing these rockets. But for the love of God, stop doing what you're doing in Gaza. Now listen to this, because this gets even crazier. Hezbollah had agreed to the long-standing Israeli demand to pull back to the Litani River, but on the condition of Israel accepting a ceasefire in Gaza. That was too much for Israel, and it opted instead for war because a new Biden would once again line up behind Netanyahu. So in other words, Nasrallah was willing to say, all right, look, we will give in to one of your key demands. We will retreat back behind the Litani River. In other words, giving away some of Lebanon's territory, southern Lebanon's territory, right? That's what he was saying. We'll give that away. But you have to stop doing what you're doing in Gaza. You have to stop doing the genocide. You have to stop. But you have a deal, we'll retreat. In other words, we're going to give Israel a big part of what they're asking for, but they have to stop the genocide in Gaza. And Israel said no. They said no. And then they assassinated all the top officials. According to the Lebanese Ministry of Health, 24 people were killed and 29 others injured in initial toll of Israeli aggression on, I'm going to butcher this, Ain al-Delb, east of Sidon in southern Lebanon. The targeted building was housing displaced people. So Ryan Grimm shows the video here. This building was filled with civilians. Horrifying. Here we go. That's the aftermath. You can see the building falling. Ryan Grimm was also able to get in contact with somebody who knew one of the people who died in this bombing was a professor. And Grimm spoke to somebody who basically like eulogized this professor and said, he was a great guy and taught me this and that, and, rest in peace to him. So again, here we go.
A lot of civilians, man. Ynet reports that Israeli military is effectively imposing a blockade of Lebanon, striking its land crossings with Syria and machinery used to repair them, as well as controlling which flights land at Beirut's airport. Again, here we go again. Here we go again. Now, they're in an unwinnable situation, right? Not only Hezbollah, but also Iran, because Israel wants them to do some sort of big attack back, to do some massive attack in Tel Aviv, right? And then they turn around and say, oh, how dare you do such aggression? Now we're really going to war with you. U.S., go do our dirty work, right? And Biden has made very clear, sure, yeah, we're right there with you, Israel, no matter how genocidal you get. And so if they fight back, it guarantees a much worse death toll and much more destruction for the region and for their respective governments, right? But if they don't fight back, they're literally just sitting ducks, and Israel will keep doing shit like this. How many more suburbs in Beirut are going to be bombed by Israel? And so they really are in an unwinnable situation. Now, by the way, Hezbollah has been begging Iran, please, for the love of God, intervene. We need you to protect us. We don't have the same ability you do, especially now that the top brass is totally wiped out. And Israel probably wiped out a lot of the weapons depots of Hezbollah. And Iran is basically like, kick rocks, right? Because Iran knows, hey, if we aid them, if we strike Israel, even if we just go to Lebanon to try to repel Israel that way, in other words, fight more defensively than offensively, even in that scenario, boom, U.S. media will kick into gear. U.S. politicians and Israeli politicians will kick into gear. This illegal aggression from Iran. Now we must go topple the regime. More on that later, by the way, because Netanyahu said something pretty wild about Iran. So Jared Kushner came out and said the following. September 27th is the most important day in the Middle East since the Abraham Accords breakthrough. I've spent countless hours studying Hezbollah, and there's not an expert on earth who thought that what Israel has done to decapitate and degrade them was possible. Anyway, he goes on. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but as Michael Tracy points out here, Jared Kushner calls for an invasion of Lebanon and demands full U.S. support for the, quote, peace-seeking nation of Israel in this endeavor. Totally Orwellian shit here. Reminder, Kushner ran the Middle East policy portfolio for Donald Trump. Jesus Christ. At the same time that's going on, Israel, according to Dropsite News, Israel launched multiple airstrikes on Yemen targeting Hodeidah, the port of Hodeidah, which is where they get the overwhelming majority of their goods for the country. We have a video here. Aftermath of the strike. Now remember, Yemen was already a country that was dealing with famine. They're reliant on humanitarian aid. Israel was, of course, doing a genocide against the people of Yemen for a very long period of time. Now Israel is picking up that mantle and attacking Yemen because the Houthis have been launching rockets to try to stop Israel from genocide in Gaza. And attacking the port is brutal because, again, the people who are primarily going to be impacted by this are the civilians of Yemen. That's where like 80% of their goods in the country comes from, and they're relying on humanitarian aid. Now the port is destroyed. The IDF is acknowledging their targeting of Yemen's seaport and multiple power plants. 17 members of Congress call to stop weapons in some form to Israel. As this person points out, this number is so shamefully, damningly small. Only 17 Congress people. What more would Israel have to do? Guys, I've said this like a year ago now. I don't think there's anything. And it wasn't a year ago. Couldn't have been a year ago. It was probably like 6 months ago I said this, or 7 months ago. I don't think there's anything that Israel could do where the U.S. and Congress would be like, you know what? Too far. Because they've already done everything. They've routinely attacked hospitals and schools and UN buildings and aid workers. They've done a total siege, no food, no fuel, no water, no electricity. They've cut off medicine going in, and you've had to have children have arms and legs amputated with no anesthesia. People are going thirsty. People are starving. There's literally like a fucking polio outbreak because the health conditions are so horrible because people are crammed into these tiny spaces without good sanitation. I've never seen anything like this. Stories come out about literal concentration camps in Israel where they have innocent Palestinians and they're torturing them, and some of them were tortured to death with anal grape. right? They've done everything. Now launching an attack in the suburbs in Beirut, killing hundreds of civilians. They've done everything. The only thing they haven't done is drop a nuke, right? And if they were to drop a nuke, how is that really all that different from what we've seen to this point? With 48,000 dead Palestinians in Gaza, now they're making a move on the West Bank. They're attacking Lebanon. Like, I don't think there's anything. So only 17 members of Congress have even a bare minimum conscience. That is incredibly disturbing. Incredibly disturbing. And it shows you they're either ideologically captured or they're bought by AIPAC or both of those things. And probably it's a mix for almost all of them, right? They start to believe all this goofy nonsense that say Israel's our top ally and they're so necessary for American strength. And they start believing that nonsense. Or it's just, hey, you bought me, AIPAC, I'm going to do your bidding. Or again, it's a mix of those things. It's just unconscionable. All right, more. So this was Benjamin Netanyahu giving a speech to the UN when he launched that attack on Beirut. And he said this.
They fire these rockets and missiles not from military sites, not from that. They do that too. But they fire those rockets and missiles after they place them in schools, in hospitals, in apartment buildings, and in the private homes of the citizens of Lebanon. They endanger their own people. They put a missile in every kitchen, a rocket in every garage. I said to the people of Lebanon this week, get out of the death trap that Hezbollah has put you in.
A missile in every kitchen and a rocket in every garage. This sounds like the same shit they said about Gaza before they wiped Gaza off the map, right? This is the same shit. He's giving the justification and the pretext to, yeah, I destroyed all these suburban homes, but I had to because they had a missile in every kitchen and a rocket in every garage. Who believes this? Who believes this? Apparently, the Biden administration does. Or they know it's bullshit and they don't care. But guys, this is unhinged. This is unhinged. And this is brought to you by the same guy who said the war in Iraq was going to be brilliant and it's going to lead to puppies and rainbows and they're going to be welcoming us as liberators and throwing flowers at our feet and it's going to have a positive effect throughout the region. And we fucking broke the Middle East. He's been wrong about everything. He's a neocon, bloodthirsty warmonger, and he's also wrong about everything. And as he was saying, basically, hey, these civilian houses are not actually civilian houses, he was bombing civilians in Lebanon. And again, they're in an unwinnable position. If they fight back, then Israel just opens up the gates of hell more. If they don't fight back, Israel will just keep slowly but surely killing civilians and bombing infrastructure, civilian infrastructure, homes, etc. It's a totally unfucking winnable position. At the same time, it's not like the killing in Gaza has stopped. On Sunday, at least 28 people were killed across Gaza, with 18 more Palestinians killed in Israeli attacks overnight. Among the casualties in Sheikh Radwan neighborhood, an airstrike on a family home injured nearly a dozen children. They were brought to the hospital. Here's one of them right here. They also killed a journalist. There was an Al Jazeera report about that. Listen to this. According to Jeremy Scahill, Netanyahu in a speech, quote, to the Iranian people, there is nowhere in the Middle East Israel cannot reach. The regime is bringing you, the noble Persian people, closer to the abyss. He says Iran will be, quote, free a lot sooner than people think, and that everything will be different. In other words, he's saying what we did to Gaza, what we're doing to the West Bank, what we're in the process, the beginning of doing to Lebanon, that's also coming to you, Iran. Is there literally anybody on earth who's honest who can look at this and say, I think Israel's being defensive? They clearly are the aggressive one, are the offensive one, are starting all the shit. The U.S. Embassy in Beirut, so in Lebanon, is not evacuating U.S. citizens at this time. There is a commercially available flight that U.S. citizens who express interest in departing Lebanon will have to book and pay directly with the airline. So this is what the U.S. Embassy in Beirut is saying. The U.S. government feels like they can't come out and say, yes, we're going to evacuate, American Lebanese citizens. They feel like they can't say that because if they say that, they're admitting, yeah, Israel is targeting like innocent civilians and waging all-out war against Lebanon, right? And they're trying to act like, no, it's very targeted and they're only going after Hezbollah. So like, we're not evacuating these people. But this commercial flight that they're talking about, it keeps getting canceled. And also when people go to, buy a ticket, the prices are like freakishly high, right? So in other words, this is the U.S. putting a middle finger up to dual citizens who are American and Lebanese. This person says, these goons spent a decade banging the drum of Benghazi every day and have now conveniently decided that nearly 100,000 American citizens in Lebanon are good to find their own way out or perish in the carpet bombings their own state is orchestrating. That's right. There's an estimated 86,000 U.S. citizens reside in Lebanon. Finally, I want to play this for you. So this is a Lebanese podcast, and they're going to give you their thoughts on what's going on. Listen to this.
World for attention, asking us to help, showing us death and destruction. No one did fucking shit, so I have zero expectations that anybody's coming to save us, bro. We're going to fucking die alone, and we're going to live stream you guys are going to get another live stream, another live stream, the genocide on your phones. And it's only going to cost you a few tax dollars, and yeah, that's it. So it might seem crazy, but like, we might die. We might die, bro. We might. No. Less likely to die than people in the South. But so we might die in this fucking conflict, just sitting here doing our thing. They might decide to blow up the fucking shirkat ṭEBANON, just fucking die, driving on a bridge, fucking blow it up, go to a hospital, blow it up. Then they'll say that we were Hezbollah agents and we were hiding weapons or whatever. You know, they'll come up with any excuse. The hospital had weapons. The school was on top of a weapons cache.
I mean, I've been struggling to come up with a way to describe this, which is really sufficiently accurate and biting. And I can't. I'm at a loss for words. Words don't do it justice. The myth of, you know, targeted surgical strikes against just the bad guys has been so thoroughly shattered for so long that now it feels like everybody knows that's not the case, but there's just a lot of passive acceptance, right? Like, well, what can we do about it, right? I mean, I don't have the answer to that. I don't have the answer to that, but what I do know is I cannot stand the war criminals. I cannot stand the people who lie to defend them and protect them. And it really is a stark awakening that things I took for granted previously are no longer the case. I thought certainly when push comes to shove, people will be willing to acknowledge the obvious. Hey, genocide is bad. Killing innocent civilians on purpose is bad. But no, we're faced with a situation exactly like that, and a lot of people defend it. And a lot of people shrug. And again, I want to reiterate, all the rules and regulations and laws that we thought somewhat applied internationally, even if the framework was kind of weak, it's not true. It's not true. There is no international law. There is no humanitarian law. There is no cop on the beat. You know, there are dead-eyed psychopaths behind the scenes taking money from the weapons industry and the Israel lobby who are just greenlighting the worst, most horrific slaughters you've ever seen in your life on a daily basis. Then they have the nerve to get in front of the world and virtue signal like they're the forces of light against the forces of darkness. Every single genocidal, brutal regime in history had a narrative, had a story about how actually we're the good guys. Actually, we're the good guys and they're the bad guys. Every single one. And this is no different. This is no different. But there is one big difference. And the one big difference is now that we have more free-flowing information and social media and things of that nature, it has become basically impossible to hide the truth and hide the reality. That Israel is a savage, barbaric, settler, colonial state, and it's an ethno-state, and it's kind of a theocracy, and it's expansionist in nature, and it will stop at nothing to destroy its neighbors and take more territory, right? I don't see a way out of that. I think it's staring us right in the face. It's slapping us across the face that this is the reality of that government, and we are arming it, we are funding it, we are supporting it every step of the way, and we're lying to the world as we go, saying, no, they're the good guys, and they're being defensive, and they're just, whatever. So I can't. I've run out of words, man. I've run out of words. And then again, what happens from here? Who are they going to attack next? The final point I'll make is this. If the Israelis have a massive technological advantage, right? And they have a massive air advantage over Hezbollah and Iran. The one area where Hezbollah feels like, no, we have the advantage would be on the ground. They say they have 100,000, fighting members, forces. And I don't know if that's true, even if you say it's like maybe 70,000 or whatever. The one realm where they feel like, no, we'll take you on in this way is a ground invasion, right? And so if Israel does a ground invasion into Lebanon, then it'll get interesting. And there will be a lot of casualties on both sides, but Hezbollah fancies their chances if Israel does a ground invasion. But if Israel doesn't do a ground invasion and they just keep raining terror from the sky, they can do to Lebanon exactly what they did to Gaza,
right? Especially now that the top members of Hezbollah are eliminated, and it's very possible that they destroyed many of the weapons depots that they had. If they have done those things, which it looks like they may have done, then we could just be seeing a rerun of what just happened in Gaza, what Israel also wants to do to the West Bank, and the U.S. is refusing to pull the leash. They're refusing to check them. Refusing! It's beyond disturbing, man. As I said, I've run out of words to describe it. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.